right with you. The Morning Majority, 5 to 9 on 630 WMAL.
736 on WMAL. Brian Neiman, Michael Steele, former head of the RNC, also former Lieutenant Governor of Maryland in the House this morning.
We're the majority.
We are joined now by ABC's Jake Tapper, senior White House correspondent for ABC News. Morning, Jake.
Good morning. How are you?
Hey, Jake.
Conventional wisdom is that finding bin Laden in Pakistan was going to give us, the United States, more leverage with the Pakistanis. They haven't been all that cooperative, although I believe that they're going to allow us to at least talk to bin Laden's wives coming up. But how would you describe the relationship with Pakistan today, a week later?
Well, look, the Pakistani government is in a very difficult situation, and however critical the U.S. is of them, I've also heard officials say that they understand completely how difficult the spot they're in is, because they're being squeezed on both sides. On one hand, you have legitimate, not just extremists, but legitimate criticism coming from inside their own country about how the U.S. went into a sovereign country, did this military operation without telling them. This is something that any country would be not happy about. And then on the other side, you have people in the West and others in Pakistan saying, how could you not have known that bin Laden was there? So they are in a difficult situation. I will say that the approach I'm told that the U.S. is taking with Pakistan is direct, but also not confrontational, in the sense that it's more along the lines of, hey, look, we understand you must be as surprised as we were that bin Laden was here. Let's figure out how this happened and figure out how to tackle Al-Qaeda. It's not as confrontational as the mood might suggest, as the moment might suggest. It's more, they're trying to take a longer view of this.
Jake, the idea though is that we've dropped over $20 billion or close to $20 billion into this country over the last 10 years. There's another $3 billion currently sitting on the table for Pakistan. How do you think Americans can rationalize spending this money with a partner whom they can't trust, who allows our number one nemesis to live? Now, look, if Osama had been in Pakistan for 60 days, living in this posh little establishment down the block from the military academy, where nobody seems to know was there, okay, but almost 6 years. I mean, really. I mean, how do you think Americans can rationalize? I get the whole political speak and the whole diplomatic dance, as I likened to a Russian ballet a little bit earlier. But how do you think Americans should really look at this thing objectively?
Well, I certainly understand the criticism, and I don't, obviously, as a reporter, I don't have a position on this, but I can tell you, Lawrence Wright from the New Yorker, his view is we should just end military aid to Pakistan, period. This has been an experiment, not just in the last few years, but in the last few decades, that it's just not worked. That the U.S. decided to try to forge an alliance with Pakistan while the Soviets were cozying up to India years and years ago, and all we have done, this is Lawrence Wright's view in the New Yorker, all we have done is basically fund terrorism and Pakistan's nuclear program. Now, on the other argument is, look, they're a flawed ally, about as flawed as you can get. But what happens if they are not a flawed ally, but they are actually an enemy? What do we get then? What is the long-term interest of the U.S.? The White House argues that more terrorists have been killed and captured in Pakistan since 9/11 than anywhere else. That for all the flaws, there is a lot of cooperation that we don't know about. So, I'm glad I don't have to make these decisions. It's my job to point out the flaws and the questions and not have to make the decisions. But those are the two arguments.
Well, the other tough decision right now, and was something we talked about for quite some time, and the president had a view when he was running for president in 2008, was Guantanamo. And I know Eric Holder yesterday in Paris said that the success of the operation to kill bin Laden has not changed the president's or his mind when it comes to closing Gitmo. And he actually still thinks that by closing the facility, the national security of the U.S. would be improved. Having said that, is there any political wiggle room for the president to actually do that, especially since they changed their mind on KSM?
Well, I mean, these are all theoretical arguments at this point because there just isn't the will in Congress. I mean, Democrats and Republicans in Congress are not willing to close down Gitmo, and so all of these discussions just become theoretical. There's no point in President Obama saying that his position has changed because A, they say it hasn't, and B, even if it doesn't matter. I mean, he can't close Gitmo. There is not the will in Congress, and until there is the will in Congress, there's no point in picking that fight.
Do we have an idea if what would happen if we picked up a high-value target in Pakistan or somewhere else, where that person would go? Say Ayman al-Zawahiri was found in Pakistan. Would he go to Gitmo? Do we know that from the White House?
He would go to Bagram. I mean, that's where the Obama administration is holding those who have been captured, not just in Pakistan and Afghanistan, but in other places around the world. That's I wouldn't call it the new Gitmo, but that is new. That is where high value and terrorist detainees are being kept.
Well, it's a lower profile. Let's just put it that. It goes to my earlier point. I don't know why we have to make such a big deal about where we house these people to do what we need to do to get the information to crack this network. But that's another point for later. Jake, one other thing I want to touch on. I thought the Chris Wallace Donilon conversation was very interesting this weekend when asked about enhanced interrogation. The National Security Advisor was, how should we say, circumspect at best with respect to what we should be doing with these high-profile targets when it's time to get information from them when we capture them. As Chris Wallace put it, so you tell me that shooting a guy, an unarmed man in the head, is a better act for us than waterboarding under very scrutinized, highly scrutinized, regimented procedures. What is your take on that? What's the White House's kind of walk away from that one?
I mean, these are just basically, rules of basic military rules of engagement as to when somebody is in your control versus when somebody is not, and there are, as we all know, when you're on the field of battle, you can do things that you cannot do when somebody is actually when you have taken possession of them, when they are your captive.
So does that mean that going forward now we don't capture, we just kill them?
If you're in a firefight with somebody, or if you're trying to take somebody prisoner and they're resisting, you can shoot them. But once somebody is handcuffed in a prison, you cannot do things to them in that situation. So I mean, it really has to do with the position that the captive is in.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jake. Good to talk to you as always. We appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks very much.
Appreciate you, man.
Anytime, guys. Have a good day.
All righty.
Jake Tapper, senior White House correspondent for ABC News here on